Hello everyone. Welcome to an all-new webcast from SecPod. Thank you for joining this session in your busy schedule. Today's webinar is going to be on what's new in SanerNow 5.2. So in this session, we will be taking a look at the latest updates and feature enhancements which are a part of our latest SanerNow 5.2 release. The recording of this webinar will be available in BrightTalk channel as well as SecPod's YouTube channel. You will be also receiving an email of the recording. If you have any questions during this session, please raise to us. And towards the end of the session, we will be providing answers for those. And I hope you're able to view the presentation clearly and hear my voice. And before we begin, let me quickly introduce the presenters for today. I'm Dikshita from the product marketing team. And along with me, we have Kaushik, our Director of Engineering. Let us take a look at today's agenda. To begin with, we will be covering the single sign-on feature which we have recently introduced in the SanerNow 5.2 release. Kaushik will be explaining us about the vendors we are supporting in single sign-on. Followed by that, we will be looking at the multi-factor authentication vendors which we have newly supported in the latest release. And then we will be looking at the exclude vulnerabilities and patches features which we have added in our latest release. Followed by that, we will be looking at how to discover and remediate vulnerabilities from the same console. We have introduced an option where you can remediate vulnerabilities from the vulnerability management dashboard itself. Kaushik will be explaining us about that and giving us a product walkthrough on that. Apart from this, he will be also explaining us about some of the key enhancements which are a part of the release. And towards the end of the session, we will be discussing the questions and answers. So if you have any questions, please do raise it to us. At the end of the webinar, we will be taking up the questions. Over to Kaushik now to take us through the webinar.
Thank you, Dikshita. Hello, all, and thank you for joining today's product webinar. I'm excited about all the new capabilities which are delivered as part of the Saner 5.2 release, and I'll walk you through the main features and also demonstrate each of this feature. So let's get started. So one of the key enhancement or feature which we have delivered is the single sign-on support. As most of you would know that single sign-on provides the centralized identity management and it provides seamless authentication. So in any enterprise environment, customers would always have multiple applications hosted and they would like to have a single identity provider, which is also called as IDP, to manage all their identities so that onboarding any users or offboarding or managing their passwords, everything is simplified. So with 5.2, now SanerNow as an application supports single sign-on, and we support all the major vendors like AWS, Azure, Ping ID, Ping Federate, Okta, as well as Auth0. In fact, some of the list what I've mentioned here are the ones which we have qualified and it is working. But apart from these major vendors, we also support all the SSO providers who are actually SAML v2 compliant. So let's jump into the demo and look at how do you configure the single sign-on policy and how do you enable SSO for the users. So what I'll be doing is I'll be switching my screen. Dikshita, can you confirm if you're able to see the screen with SanerNow console?
Yes, Kaushik, the screen is visible.
Thank you. So this is the SanerNow admin dashboard. As soon as you log in, this is your dashboard which talks about all your managed devices and gives you a single view which explains all the related things related to vulnerability, compliance, patches. So as soon as you log in, you need to click on your control panel. And when you click on the control panel, we have a section called as authentication, and you need to click on the single sign-on. So this is the landing page to manage all your SSO authentication policies. So this is the place where you can create a new policy, you can edit the existing policy, or you can delete the policy. So now let's look at how do you create an SSO policy. So you need to click on the new policy, and this is where you enter the details. So before we could enter the details for this demo, I've just taken ping identity as an identity provider, and SanerNow as an application is a service provider. That's a terminology in the single sign-on. So IDP is the one who manages all the identity, and service provider is the application which uses the single sign-on from the identity provider. So for creating an SSO policy, there are two things which needs to be done. One is we need to go to the identity provider and create an application for the SanerNow SSO and export some of the details such as issuer ID, SSO URL, and certificate. So for that, in the IDP, they would need some kind of a service provider metadata. So what needs to be done is it's a two-step process. So first is, since SanerNow is a service provider, we can download the metadata here, which provides all the basic details in terms of the certificate and what should be the SAML, as well as the login URL and the organization URL. So with this details, so the first step is to download the metadata and then go to your identity provider. In this case, for the demo, I'll be using ping ID as explained. So let me. So as soon as you log into the ping one dashboard, you can go to the application and you can create a new SAML application. So here I've already created a SAML application. So if you look at, let me log in. So when you create a new application, you need to provide the metadata which you have downloaded in the previous step from the service provider. And once you create this, you can download the SAML metadata from the identity provider. So you can click on this and it will download the SAML metadata. So once you have created the application on the IDP and downloaded the SAML metadata, you can come back here, and then it's a very simple step for you to create. Let's create one policy. Give a name for the SSO policy, and description can be provided. So you have two options now. One is you can manually copy the issuer ID, SSO URL, and the certificate from the IDP metadata from these fields. Or if you have already downloaded, you can just import the SAML metadata, which will automatically populate all the details. And all you need to do is to just create it. Okay, so policy name already exists. I'll give another policy. That's it. So as simple as two steps procedure for you to create the SSO policy. And once the SSO policy has been created, the next step would be to assign this policy to the users. So let's go to the users. I have a set of users already created. So if you want to assign the SSO policy to any user, you have two options. One is this icon is where you need to click on, and then you can assign the list of policies. So right now we created policy 2, you can assign this policy or any other policy, right? So for this demo, we can just assign this policy. Now, if you look at it, a green icon is already enabled, which means an SSO policy is already applied. If you want to either withdraw the policy or you want to change to a different SSO policy, you can do that by again clicking on this icon. You have one more option where you can select multiple users based on the filters available, and then you can do at once. Let's say you want to select all the users belonging to the demo group, you can do that, and then you can do a global assignment of policy or withdrawal of policy. So now let's look at a small demo on how the SSO functionality works. Now that we have seen how to create a policy, how to edit a policy, and how to manage it, now we have applied policies for a few of the users like SSO user 1, user 2, which is already configured for the ping identity. Now let's look at logging in as one of those users. I'm logging in as SSO user 2, which has a policy for ping identity. So if you look at it, it is asking for the ping identity authentication because you don't have an existing authenticated session on the ping identity. So for the first time, it will ask you for the authentication. Once you successfully authenticate to ping identity, you get a SAML response and which we validate, and then it will allow you to log in. Once you have logged in, you can continue to perform all the operations. Let's say now you have logged into ping identity and you're just logging out only from SanerNow. So the session is still valid from the ping identity, right? Or you can also log in into your IDP using some other mechanism where the session is still valid. And now if you log in for the second time, since the session is already active, it will automatically log in you into the application without again asking for another time password. So this is how the SSO functionality works. I'm just going to log out. Log in back as administrator. So this policy can be created by either an account admin or an ARC admin, and they can manage this SSO policies. And you can also edit, for example, the policy 2 we just created. You can edit the policy, and you can also make any modification. We also have an option for signed authentication. Some of the identity providers provide this support where you have a signed authentication. So every request which goes from the service provider will be signed, and this certificate will be available at the identity provider side to validate if the requests are coming from the service provider. This is an additional authentication check which can be enabled. So just check if the identity provider supports this option, then you can enable this. But we do support from the service provider perspective. So that's about the single sign-on. Let me switch and move to the next feature. Yeah, the next feature is multi-factor authentication. Again, this adds a second layer of protection apart from the username and password, and it is very critical to avoid any security breaches. So again, in 5.1, we had supported ping 1 as a multi-factor authentication support. And with 5.2, we have now enabled multiple other vendors, including Ping ID, Okta, and Authenticator app, which is a generic authenticator app which supports TOTP. So let me switch to the application and demonstrate you how to configure an MFA policy and how this feature works. Okay, so as soon as you log in, again, same control panel, and under authentication, you have multi-factor. So if you look at it by default, we already have a policy for generic authenticator app, which is based on TOTP, and any TOTP authenticator app we support. It could be Google, Azure, any TOTP we do support, right? And this policy can be applied for any of the users. In addition to that, you can create a new policy. Like I mentioned, you can we do support ping 1, ping ID, Okta. So any of this you can add and provide these details. Again, these details are very similar to single sign-on, where you go to the identity provider, you create an multi-factor authenticator details for the service provider and get all the details here, and you can create a policy, or you can import if the identity provider supports exporting the property files, you can import them. And again, how once you create the policy, assigning MFA policy is also simple, similar to SSO. So let's go back to users. And if you look at it, the first icon was for single sign-on, but second one is for multi-factor authentication. So the green indicates that the multi-factor authentication policy has been applied, and the gray icon indicates that it's not enforced yet. So if at all you want to enforce any user on multi-factor authentication, the steps would remain same. You need to click on it, and you can select any one of the existing policies which you have already created and just confirm. That will enable the MFA policy. So I have already created for this demo purpose one of the MFA user where this user has MFA policy enabled, and this time for the demo purpose I've used Okta multi-factor authentication. So let's look at a demonstration on that. So I'm selecting MFA user 2 as a password. Now, if you look at it, since this MFA is enabled, this policy is for Okta, it provides various options, depends on what you have configured on the Okta policy. In this case, you can see you can enter a Google code or Okta code or a push notification. Similarly, you can have email or their own native app authentication as well, right? So this depends on totally on your policy. So right now, let's select enter Google code. And I'm going to use my authenticator app. So now actually this has got verified, and then you're able to log in. So similarly, any other vendor also, you can configure the MFA policy and assign it to the respective users. So this is about the multi-factor authentication. Let me switch to the next feature. So the next feature is excluding vulnerabilities and patches from reporting. While our recommendation has always been to fix all the vulnerabilities and security patches, right? Prioritize them and fix as soon as possible. But there are situations where administrator wants to exclude certain vulnerabilities, or they want to exclude certain patches so that they don't want to remediate those patches, or they don't want to report certain vulnerabilities. Could be they have assessed the risk and they know that it's not going to be they accept the risk and they don't want to report such vulnerabilities. So we have added this capabilities. We have added this capability where an administrator can actually exclude one or more vulnerability, or they can select an asset and say exclude all vulnerabilities related to the asset, or you can exclude a patch as well. So let's look at the demo on how do you create such policies and how you exclude them. All right, first let's look at the excluding the vulnerability part. So as soon as you log in, this is an organization. Every organization can have multiple accounts. So by default, we have the underscore default. You can rename it or you can give your own account name. For this demo, I've just kept it as underscore default. And let's get into the vulnerabilities, right? And look at how we can exclude a vulnerability. So this is the VM dashboard. It gives you details about all the vulnerabilities. It also gives you the device view on what devices and how many vulnerabilities are there, what are their severity distribution, how many assets have the vulnerabilities. But let's get into the section where we can exclude a vulnerability, right? For example, for this demo purpose, let's look at like the CVE. You know that the risk is not actually exposed in your environment and you accept the risk. So you want to kind of exclude this particular CVE from reporting. So all you need to do is you need to select one or more CVEs, whichever you want to exclude, and then we have a quick action button. With that, you can click on the exclude. So this takes you to a small policy page. This is called an exclude policy page, where you need to provide the policy name, provide a description, and you need to select one of the reason. Could be a false positive, or it is not applicable for your environment and the risk has been accepted. So one of these reasons you need to provide. And then we also have a duration, right? How long this policy has to be in existence, and we support from 1 day to 999 days, where you can set this policy, and after those many number of days the policy will be revoked automatically. So for this demo, let's say 30 days. So this policy is valid till November 5th. You can enter more comments for your reference. And here you'll get list of vulnerabilities. You can search additional vulnerabilities and also add them. And we also have capabilities where you can even though certain vulnerabilities are not discovered in your environment, but you know certain vulnerabilities are present and you want to exclude them, you can add those custom entry as well here. So once you update the policy information, you just have to say exclude selected items. So now this 40960, which is currently displayed here, will get excluded. So once you say exclude, you can see here a small window says policy create task initiated, and a background task would get created to make sure that all the excluded vulnerabilities are removed. So now if you look at it, the exclude task has been completed. And now if you refresh the page, the whatever vulnerability we excluded would not appear, right? And there's a new page which is for managed detection. So once the policy has been created, you can go ahead and manage those excluded policies. So again, it provides all the details about what are all the policies and what is the status, whether that's enabled or disabled. You can edit, delete, and also read certain description what you have provided for you to easily identify. And you can also on hover and click on it to find out what vulnerabilities are getting excluded. So this is one way to exclude. So let's go back and look at what is the other way. So here in this case, we selected one or more vulnerabilities to exclude. Let's say you know an asset, right? For example, let's say Microsoft Edge, right? And you want to exclude all the vulnerabilities related to Microsoft Edge, or let's say um, JDK, right? So all you need to do is click on this asset, and then again you can click on exclude. So now what happens is any vulnerabilities which are for this particular asset, Java 180 OpenJDK, will get excluded, right? So you have two options. One is you can select the vulnerabilities which you want to exclude, or you can select an asset and all the vulnerabilities related to that asset will get excluded. Once it gets excluded, you'll not be able to see in any of the dashboards or reports. And if you want to go ahead and disable it, you can disable, and then all those vulnerabilities which are been excluded will again appear back, right? So we have now seen how to exclude a vulnerability. Similarly, there are situations wherein you want to exclude a patch. For example, there are certain developer applications and there are certain patches which you don't want to apply. It could be for your test environments, or there are many other use cases. So you can go to PM dashboard, and from the PM dashboard, you can select any of the patches. For this demo purpose, probably I can just select one of these, let's say glibc. This is a patch, and then click on exclude. So again, same way, you can just enter the policy name, description, you can select the risk, either not applicable or risk accepted, enter the duration, and then click on exclude selected items. So this will make sure that the patch, whatever you have excluded, will not appear here. And this is taken care both in creating the remediation job, as well as if you have any automation rule, there also this patch won't get remediated through automation rule. So if you want to look at all the exclusions, again, similar to the VM, we have a separate page where you can look at all the excluded policies. You can edit the policy, you can look at it. One policy which I'd already created, I'd excluded curl, and I've put a expiry date of 60 days, right? And you can again add your own custom patch entries, or you can go here, search for additional patch entries and update it, and those changes would reflect here. And you want to delete, you can go ahead and delete the policy. You want to disable, you can go ahead and click on the disable button, so that automatically this gets disabled temporarily. um, in the sense the policy would still exist, but it will be in a disabled state. If you want to enable it again, you can click on the enable. So this is how you can exclude both vulnerabilities as well as patch. So it comes in handy in some situations where administrator clearly knows that this is something which they want to exclude. So moving on to the next feature, ability to remediate vulnerability from the VM dashboard. So prior to 5.2, even though we had integrated capabilities where you can identify the vulnerabilities and then you can go to the PM dashboard and to remediate it, it used to be like a two-step process. What we have now done is simplified the whole process. You can identify the vulnerability and you can patch from the VM dashboard itself. So it comes in really handy where you can identify the patches and create remediation tasks from the VM. So let's see how we can do this. So let me go back to the VM dashboard. So let's say there's a vulnerability, which is a Firefox, and you want to remediate this. So earlier, what we need to do is to check the fix info and go to the PM page and then remediate them. Now we have the capability where you can select and then click on the remediate option, and it will straight away. Yeah, for this the patch is not available, so we can pick one of them where the patch is available. I pick one of the CD where patch is available. So I just select the vulnerability, one or more vulnerabilities where the patch, where there is a remediation, and then select that. It will directly tell me what is the asset name and what is the patch, how many risks it is going to mitigate, and how many hosts it is. I just select this and I'll say approve, and then it automatically gets selected. All you need to do is just apply selected patches, and just create a task name. Say let's say patching task, and then you can provide a remediation schedule, and you can review the information. And if you want any additional task controls, you can provide that. Otherwise, you can just click on apply selected patches. So this will make sure that from the VM dashboard itself, you can identify the vulnerabilities, prioritize them, and then remediate from the vulnerability dashboard itself. So it comes in very handy when you are doing your prioritization and you want to remediate. So moving on, the next one is aiding the vulnerability prioritization. So we have added two new capabilities. One is a new icon to identify the vulnerabilities with high fidelity attacks. And also now you can start vulnerability search based on the exploit specific keywords. So let me demonstrate and also explain how this will help you in your prioritization. So let's go back to the VM dashboard. So prioritizing vulnerabilities, I mean, if you look at any organization with large number of devices, there are always large number of vulnerabilities, and every day there are hundreds of new vulnerabilities getting detected. It's very important for an administrator to make sure that they prioritize the vulnerabilities and identify the most critical, and then take remediation action on priority, right? So we already provide various ways to prioritize them. For example, based on the severity or the exploitability, we also have something called as high fidelity attacks, wherein if there are any uh, vulnerabilities which are related to ransomware, trojans, worms, or any other related information, you can easily find out these things. But now we also have added a capability wherein you can look at a vulnerability and then identify if that vulnerability belongs to any of the high fidelity attacks, right? So I'm just selected all vulnerabilities. So if you look at, this is the new icon where it tells you about the high fidelity attack, and you can click on it. It will actually tell you what the high fidelity attack information about, right? So this actually helps you in easily identifying what and all are the vulnerabilities which are mapped to high fidelity attacks, so that it's going to help you prioritize. So this is this is going to help immensely for the administrators to prioritize. In addition to that, we have also enhanced the capabilities where you can search based on some kind of an exploit specific keywords. For example, we all are familiar with WannaCry ransomware. So I can search based on particular ransomware or malware, and it's going to list all the CVs related to those particular things, so that I can select all and take certain action. Similarly, if you want to search, let's say, anything related to remote code injection, right? Or get me the list of all vulnerabilities related to the remote code injection, so we can get those, right? So this is going to be very useful, especially when there are like thousands of vulnerabilities and you want to search all the vulnerabilities and prioritize them. This is going to be very handy. Similarly, we also have a new page called as all vulnerabilities. So whatever I did here is part of the vulnerability table, but this is exclusively to manage all your vulnerabilities. So whatever I did right now, all those things can be done from the all vulnerabilities page. So it gives you like one page for all the details related to vulnerabilities. Again, you can see all the icons related to high fidelity attacks. It sorts based on the the vulnerabilities which has the high fidelity attacks, provides you all the information about title, severity, how many assets this vulnerabilities, and how many hosts are affected by this vulnerability, when it was detected, and also you can select the vulnerabilities and do an exclude or remediate and search based on the keyword, and also export the CSV. So all the capabilities have been built and with this new all vulnerabilities dashboard. All right, so we'll move on to the next set of capabilities. So apart from the some of the main features which I talked about, some of the other key enhancements, what we have done is SanerNow already has a broad coverage of platforms supported for agents. We support Windows, Mac, and all major Linux flavors. We now have added support for SUSE Linux Enterprise as well. So it's kind of adding to the broad coverage already supported by SanerNow. So that is one uh, enhancement, I would say, adding a new platform. And the next one is all vulnerabilities. I just spoke about that and also demonstrated. So this is kind of an exclusive page where you can use for your reviewing your vulnerabilities, prioritizing them, and then you can remediate them, or you want to exclude some of it, you can do that. Everything can be done from this page. Apart from this, we have actually re-architected the uh, agent feature, in the sense, all this while every account had a activation token embedded within the agent. Now what we have done is we have removed that and we have made just one installer and kept the activation token separately. So this provides multiple benefits. One is you just have one installer per platform. And if you have multiple accounts, you just need one installer, and account specific activation conf can be provided for your installation. This also helps in whenever you create any new account, you don't need to create builds again for that particular account. The same builds which are already created, which are generic enough, is good. Just that you need to provide the additional activation conf file. So this is a new capability and saves a lot of time in terms of build creation. Apart from this, we have also seen some of our customers have a unique environment wherein they have devices with a dynamic MAC. So the MAC address keeps changing. And we have also seen scenarios wherein same MAC address is used across multiple devices. So this was not supported prior to 5.2, but now we have added the capabilities. Now you can have either a dynamic MAC address for a particular device, or the same MAC address can exist on multiple devices within an account. We will be able to seamlessly support that capability as well, right? So yeah, these are some of the key enhancements. Apart from this, of course, a lot of UX enhancements and other enhancements are there. But what I've done is covered the key ones in terms of the features and enhancement. Uh, Hope this was useful. Dikshita, that's it I wanted to cover for today. Over to you.
Thank you, Kaushik. That was a very informative session. Thank you for taking us through all the important feature updates which are a part of this release. And I believe our users found it useful as well. We are moving on to the questions now. If you guys have any questions, please do let us know. We will be taking up the questions now. Kaushik, we have one question for you. Can we include the excluded vulnerability again?
Yes, Dikshita, the answer is yes. So we have two ways to bring back those excluded vulnerabilities. One is you can disable the policy. As soon as you disable the vulnerabilities which you are excluded will come back again, and all the vulnerabilities would be visible in the reporting. Similarly, for patches, it will be available for the remediation jobs or the rules. The other option is to delete the policy. And the third one is, like, let's say they have set it for 30 days. After 30 days, the policy would get expired, and all the vulnerabilities would appear if those vulnerabilities still exist in the environment. So the answer is yes. And these are the three ways where the vulnerabilities which are excluded will again start appearing.
All right. So we have another question also here. What are the versions of SUSE Enterprise Linux you support in SanerNow?
So we support the latest SUSE Linux version. So we support both 12 and 5. Let me quickly share my screen. Yeah, so in the control panel, when you select on the agent deployment, we have highlighted all the supported platforms. So here, if you look at it, the SUSE Linux Enterprise server, we support both 12 as well as 15. So all of the platforms which are supported is also listed here.
Got it. Thank you, Kaushik. And I think we are done with the questions for today. Any other questions you can always raise to us. And once again, thank you for joining this session in your busy schedule. Please do stay tuned with us, and we will soon keep you all posted about our next webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you.